Hello, welcome to my little corner. Today I've got some beverages. I'm making this extra fancy. I'm doing the highly requested story of Behind Her Eyes, which is a 6-part limited series on Netflix that's based off of a book. And wow, that was 6 hours of a British accent, and you might see me slipping into a British accent. I am pouring me some JuneShine right now. If you guys don't know about JuneShine, let me tell you. You guys know me, I'm not a huge fan of beer, I'm not a huge fan of kombucha, and they sent me I don't know if it was PR, but they sent me some JuneShine and I gave it a taste and I was like, I'm not gonna like it, but because they sent it to me, if I like it, I'm gonna keep it. If I don't, maybe I'll give it to my neighbors. I took a sip and I was so freaking confused. I was like, where has this been all my life? Today's vlog is sponsored by JuneShine, and I want to mention that they're a hard kombucha that is insanely delicious. Do you see that? Oh yeah. It's low in sugar, easy on the gut, and it's full of probiotics. I don't know if you guys know me, but I have many dedicated vlogs about how much I love probiotics. Maybe it has to do with the fact that they use green tea and honey, whereas regular kombucha, they use a ton of black tea, so it kind of has that bitter, acidic taste. But with JuneShine, you don't really get any of that. It's got 6% alcohol that's naturally brewed from the kombucha. It's fruity, it's bubbly, it's light. Look at how pretty this one is.
Whoa.
This one is Midnight Painkiller. Naturally, if you're dieting or if you're trying to live a healthy, active lifestyle, what's something people always tell you? Stay away from alcohol. Well, let me tell you, you don't have to do that because I am introducing you to JuneShine. They have no artificial coloring. They don't have GMOs. They don't have any of that high fructose corn syrup or processed rice syrup that's really, really bad for you. And so it makes JuneShine a lot less toxic for your body, but also the environment. And if you're like me and you're okay, what parts of my lives can I be a little bit more sustainable? Did you know the brewery that brews JuneShine, it's 100% powered by renewable solar energy?
Wow.
Yes. And they plant as many trees as they take to make their 6-pack boxes. And 1% of all of their sales get donated to an environmental nonprofit. Blood Orange Mint. This one, I don't even wince. I hate beer. I don't like kombucha. What is it? It tastes kind of like a refreshing sparkling water with juice. The other night we were eating some seafood and watching WandaVision. I had 2 of these and I felt amazing the next morning. And that almost never happens, even with wine, even with beer. I always get a little bit of a headache in the morning. I had none of that. So make sure to use code BIS because I'm going to leave a link in the description so that you can get 20% off when you use the code BIS for your 18-pack of the best sellers. Trust me, you're going to go through it in 3 days. Bada bing, bada boom. We're getting into the 6-hour long. I'm going to try to condense this as much as possible. I wanted to do a 2-parter, but I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to slam it into one. So, yeah, because honestly, I thought I was going to do 3 episodes for part 1 and 3 for the part 2, but nothing happened in part 1. Nothing happened until the 5th episode. So that would just be really shitty to do to you guys. So let's do this. It all starts with a woman by the name of Louise. Now, immediately when you meet Louise, she seems kind of like your quirky friend. She's a single mom. She's got this beautiful little nerdy ass son by the name of Adam, and he's one of the cute ones where he's like, Mom, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just gonna go meet my friend for drinks. And he's like, well, you look really good, Mom. One of those nerdy boys, right? So you really, really like the kid. His name's Adam, okay? He's not really pertinent until later. So she's getting ready. She's putting on all these different clothes. Her babysitter comes and she's like, thank you so much. I'm just gonna go meet a friend at a bar and I'll be back soon. So she goes to the bar and she orders her drinks, and as she's drinking, you immediately get a sense of what kind of person Louise is, because the person that she's supposed to meet, her friend Sophie, cancels on her. Texts her and says, hey, sorry, can't make it. I got a work thing. Hope it doesn't inconvenience you too much. And you can see Louise reacting. You can see her rolling her eyes, but she texts back, oh, don't worry about it. Is anything wrong? Do you need help with anything? And then she just sits there. She's just sitting there with her drink. I wonder if anyone's gonna offer to buy me a JuneShine here, looking around. And she's like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave. So she pays her tab and she gets up, and as she's walking out, you guessed it, bitch, she bumps into a man with a suit on, okay? And he's got all of his drink now spilled on his suit, and she's like, oh my God, what do I do? I'm so clumsy, Christian Grey, and she's like, please, let me buy you a drink. And he's like, it's fine. And he's just wiping off the juice of whatever whatever his drink was from his shirt. And she's like, no, seriously, let me buy you a drink, especially if you're not going to be a dick about it. Because most guys, they would have freaked out. Like, let me just buy you a drink. So she buys him a drink. And as she's about to leave, she pays for it. She's like, bye. He's like, so do you come here often? And she's like, really? So they kind of giggle and they sit down and you see this montage of them just talking until like everyone's leaving. It just seems like they're getting along really well. They're just talking about life stuff. Now, there's so many parts of this movie that are unrelatable, this being one of them, because how can you even hear in a place like this? There was so much music and noise, but suddenly they're just like whispering about their lives in each other's ears, and it's just like this romantic moment. And so she's just making him laugh. He's making her laugh. He had recently just moved from a different part of the UK. So this takes place in the UK. And he's starting his new job and he's just kind of excited about that, I guess. And they leave outside the bar and she's like, well, I'm this way. And he's like, well, I'm this way. Well, it's nice to meet you. I don't even think they got each other's names. And they're like, well, it's nice to meet you. And they just start making out. Like super intense Christian Grey vibes. So the beginning of this movie, I thought it was going to be Christian Grey vibes, right? Like this is some sort of like, oh, this is going to be like a CEO dude. Maybe he's like the next president, you know, the prime minister of the UK. All of these things. And then it went to being like a psychological thriller of like, is someone a serial killer? And then it went completely different. So there's like 3 different parts to this. So now we're in the Christian Grey part. So they start making out and he pulls away and he says, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And he just like scattles away. He just like runs away and it's just a whole moment. So Louise goes to work the next day and she's just thinking about that kiss. She's thinking about his tongue in her mouth, thinking about that moment outside, you know. And as she's doing this paperwork, it seems like she works at like a doctor's office, like a clinic, so not necessarily a hospital. And she's just like doing admin work, computer work. And so she comes in and she's like, oh, well, I'm gonna go get some coffee. So the other receptionist is like, okay, like go in there. I think our new boss is here. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. So she goes to the break room and as she's pouring herself a coffee, she can see one of the doors are open to one of the partners. So it's a doctor's office. So there's multiple partners. Mm-hmm. And the new boss, her new boss, that she's going to be the secretary of, is sitting there with his wife. And it's the guy from the bar last night.
He's a cheater.
He's a cheater, but he's also her new boss. So we got all this like a romantic Christian Grey shit going on, right? So she freaks out, she runs into the bathroom and she hides in there the whole freaking day. And so he, well, like for like an hour before he left. So he starts work tomorrow, but this was like him getting like his office set up, like getting a little tour of the place. And then he officially starts the next day. So she hid in the bathroom for like 30 minutes to an hour. And she's like telling her friend Sophie this at her house the next day. And she's like, I mean, it's freaking insane. Mm-hmm. And Sophie's like, well, what did you think about the wife? And she's like, well, she's beautiful. She's really pretty, you know, but I mean, there was like no inkling. I had no idea that he was married at all. There was no indication. I mean, when we met at the bar, it just seemed like he was sad more than anything, just like really down, I guess. So Louise goes to sleep that night and the next morning, she's going to obviously go to work and meet her new boss, aka Christian Grey, the guy that she made out with. And this is like the first inkling that maybe this isn't a Christian Grey story because she has this really intense nightmare. And it's the same nightmare throughout the entire series where she sees a woman laying in bed. It seems like maybe this is her mom, like an older woman. And there's a bottle of pills just dropping onto the ground. So you see the pills fall out, but instead of pills, they're marbles, right? Just falling all over the ground. And then her little son is screaming, Mom, help! She rushes out and the hallway is super long and it's like an abandoned building and she keeps running and her son is like hitting the walls from the rooms and you can see the imprints of his hands through the walls, just screaming like, Mom, help! And she's just trying to help her son. And that's when she'll wake up and she's sleepwalking. Like when she's running to help her son, she's like roaming around the house. And she wakes up terrified because I can only imagine how scary it is when you're sleepwalking and you're like, oh my God, like something bad could have happened, right? And like her son's sleeping in his room. So she freaks out, wakes up. Now, the next morning, okay? Now she's gonna meet Christian Grey. But I want to give you a little lowdown on his marriage. So his name is David. They haven't formally introduced himself yet, but he's David Ferguson and his wife is Adele Ferguson. Now, they're a very interesting couple. So Louise is a single mom. She lives in like, you know, this really cozy home-like apartment, whereas the Fergusons, they live in this really, really nice, beautiful house in this probably expensive part of the UK. I don't know what city this takes place in, like London? I don't fucking know. So they live in like this really beautiful house. Everything's kind of like gray, you know what I mean? Like that very clean, chic type of furniture. And Adele, she's got this clean, chic, like black hair blob. She's got a bob, you know? And they're always like eating tea for breakfast. Drinking tea for breakfast, and they like sit in their suits reading newspapers before work. Like they're that type of family. But you can kind of tell that something is really, really off, because it seems like Adele is trying to make conversations with David, talking about his first day of work. Like, are you excited? And he's just not really into it. Like he just pretty much ignores her. So maybe is he just like a shitty husband? Like what's going on here? And before he leaves for his first day of work, he forces her to take her pills. So she opens up this medicine cabinet, and it's filled with like crazy amounts of pills. And she opens up a bottle, takes one out, puts it in her mouth, drinks water, opens her mouth so that he can make sure that she took her pills. And then he says, I'll call you later, and just leaves. So the whole time that he's leaving, Adele is like, okay, well, like, love you. And he won't respond. So she like runs outside and she's like, have a good day at work. Like, love you. And he's just like, and then leaves. He's just kind of an ash. And then like after he leaves, she'll just go lay on her bed on top of the covers with her shoes on, like a full-on psychopath. Like it's all just so strange. Now it gets even weirder because you see other snippets of their day and you kind of don't know who's in charge. So at first you think, okay, maybe David is like this really evil husband and she's like a stay-at-home mom and like, or like a stay-at-home wife and she's taking all these pills. Like what's going on, right? But then eventually you start getting some odd vibes. So for example, you know, Adele would say something like, well, I'm excited. This is our new job, our new life together. We're starting fresh. And he'll just look at her and say, I really, really hope that this is the last time because I can't keep doing this, Adele. So it kind of indicates like, okay, did they move from their last place because of Adele or because of this new job or because of David? Like what's going on here? Like who's in charge? Who's the reason for all of this like shenanigans? So Louise and David meet for the first time at work and she is his secretary 3 days a week and she's like, okay, this is really awkward. The first time that she meets him like officially at work, she's got ketchup all over her white blouse because she was eating like a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich and then the ketchup just like freaking fell on her shirt. It was like one of those whole corny moments and he's like, oh my gosh, are you stalking me? And she's like, what? No, like I'm your secretary. This is weird. I mean, listen. It seems almost like Louise is the psychiatrist. So all of these people are psychiatrists. And it seems like Louise is more mature than David because she's like, I'm not going to mention it to anyone. I don't really care. Let's just act like that never happened. We were super drunk. And also I really love my job. So I would just, you know, like, I want to keep my job and keep it not weird. So here we go. And so he's like, yeah, sure. Are you really a therapist, dude? And so she's like, okay, well, tell me if you need anything. And as she's about to leave his office, he's like, wait, can you show me around the area? You're a local, right? So he pulls out this big, massive map and he's like, okay, well, what area is good? What area is, you know, a little less good? All of that jazz. And she's like, well, that's where the rich people live. So on the other side. Did you just move there? Yeah. Okay. Well, this I would avoid this area at night. Maybe this one too, not a really good area. And you see him kind of circling these areas with a red marker. So like you have this thought, maybe he's a serial killer. Maybe he's going to target these bad areas. I mean, that's just where my brain went. And she's like, why? Like, what's going on? This is like really extensive research. Do you go out at night all the time or something? And he says, well, you see, addiction work is my specialty. So I like to go out into these, you know, more impoverished areas and help people with addiction. And that's just what I like. And so she's like, well, that's really sweet of you. So she leaves. Now, Adele, like I said, she's got this issue. She likes to be psychopathic and lay in her bed with her shoes on top of the sheets and not really sleep with her little chic bob just in her multi-million-dollar London house, right? Just like this, right? And she starts having these flashbacks. So we find out that Adele was actually in a mental institution prior to all of this. When she was probably like 17 years old, 18 years old, she was housed in a mental facility. And it kind of gives you like this vibe of like, okay, you've got this like crazy wife, like mentally ill wife. Maybe that's why she's on these meds. It kind of lures you into that path. And she had this really, really good friend in that mental institution. And he's going to become a pivotal pivotal part of this entire story. His name is Robert, but she calls him Rob. So it's interesting. So Adele's background, she's from Scotland, and she grew up as this massive heiress. Her parents were filthy loaded. They had a castle, they had an estate, they had just so much money, and she was put into this mental institution when she was around 17 years old because there was this really intense fire inside of her castle, and both of her parents died in the fire. Whereas Adele, there was someone who was, driving by or had seen the fire, and we'll get into it later, but that person had pulled her out of the fire. Out of the burning castle. So she ended up surviving. She inherited this massive wealth at like 17 years old, but they were like, we got to make sure you're okay because your parents both just died, so we're going to put you in a mental institution just to make sure, right? And she was probably losing it a little bit. So she's in this mental institution. She meets Rob. Rob is from the opposite side of Scotland. So he grew up in a really impoverished area. His family all do drugs. He is there because he's addicted to heroin. He can't stop doing heroin. He loves heroin. I was going to say heroin's is crack, but like heroin is heroin. That doesn't make any sense. So, he's there for addiction issues, and they meet. And the reason that they start bonding is because Adele, she's really good at kind of reigning in her nightmares. She's got these really intense night terrors is what they call it, and she found out how to control her dreams a little bit. In the sense, how we would call it lucid dreaming? So that's pretty much like what she did. So she would constantly have these nightmares about her parents dying every single day. And so nowadays, when she goes to sleep, she's able to control what she dreams about because she doesn't want to dream about that. She wants to dream about like happy, flower fields and stuff. Now, Robert, he has these crazy dreams too. And that's why he's in this institution. Like he does all these drugs, the dreams get worse, the hallucinations get worse. And it's just like this rapid fuel. And so she's teaching him like, I can teach you how to lucid dream. Don't worry. So that's how they start bonding, and it almost seems like a really, really wholesome friendship. And you kind of wonder like why they didn't end up together, because it almost seems loving. It seems like Robert loves her. It seems like Rob really, really loves her for like who she is type of vibe. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Louise is having the same night terrors. So Louise is constantly going to sleep, waking up, sleepwalking. At one point, she had walked out to her balcony while she was sleepwalking. And the only reason that she woke up from this nightmare chasing after her son is because she bumped into the balcony. And she kind of like threw her body back and her entire arm got scratched up on something. So now she's got blood on her arm. She's waking up from this intense nightmare. She just realized that she could have died if she fell over the balcony. And she's just having a really shitty day, and her son's not even there because her son is spending time with his dad this weekend. So she goes back to sleep, and the next morning the son gets dropped off by her ex-husband, and this is where just like a bombshell drops. The ex-husband says, hey, my girlfriend Lisa, well, she's pregnant and we're gonna go to the south of France for the summer, and we invited Adam. And she's like, no, absolutely not. Like, how long are you guys going? You're trying to take away my son for like a month? No way in hell are you doing that, right? And he says, listen, I already told Adam. And Adam's like listening to the conversation, in the little corner of the hallway. And he's like, please, Mom. And she's like, nope, absolutely not. You're not going to France. Nope. And she just shoves her ex-husband out the door and slams it shut, locks it. And Adam, being the little 7-year-old he is, he's like, I hate you, Mom. And goes into his room. So Louise is freaking out. She's like, this is too much going on. I've had these night terrors. My boss, I made out with him. He's married. My son's going to leave for a month. So she calls her best friend Sophie to come over. And she starts telling Sophie, like, I just don't understand what went wrong. Like, I feel like I was the practice wife for my ex-husband. I feel like we got married, we had Adam, and then he cheated on me. And then now he's like getting another girl pregnant. He just like met her, and now he wants to take the whole family to the south of France. Like, no, that's not happening. Yeah, but Louise, don't you think that if you don't let your son go, you're going to be the villain? Think about it. The next month, he's not going to want to hang out with you. He's going to be pouting. He's going to be upset. And what? You're not going to spend any quality time with him. He's just going to end up hating you more. So Louise tells her son Adam, just 1 month. You're going to go to the south of France for summer break, and you're going to come back, and we're going to have fun. And so he's like, oh my God, like, remember when I said I hate you? I didn't really mean it. Like, I was just kidding. JK. LOL. Kids these days. And so she's like, all right, get it together, get your backpack, I gotta drop you off at school. So he's like, thank you, Mom, love you. So he grabs his backpack, they walk to the school together, and she says bye to him. And as she's leaving to go back home, she bumps into someone at a corner. And this woman just dramatically falls on the ground. She's like on her back on the sidewalk right now. And we find out it's Adele. So Adele literally ate shit, and she gets up and she's like, it's okay. She has no idea who Louise is. And Louise is like, fuck, like I know this girl, like I saw her at the office. I know that this is the wife of the husband that I just made out with like a couple days ago. And she's like, oh yeah, like nice to meet you. I'm Louise. Are you like Mrs. Ferguson? And she's like, huh? And she's like shaking her hand, and she's like, I'm your husband's secretary, and I saw your pictures on his desk, so I kind of remembered your face. And she's like, oh, you work for David. Oh, well, I insist. Like, I was just gonna go get some coffee since you're off today. Like, let's just grab some coffee together. And Louise is like, oh no, I couldn't. I have so many things to do. You know, I gotta go make out with other husbands. I gotta go. And so she's like, no. Like, this is the least you can do after bumping into me. So let's go get some coffee. So Adele guides her to the little coffee shop. They sit down and they start talking. Now, the conversation is a little bit weird. So Adele confides in Louise that she's never worked a day in her life. She's only worked about 5 minutes as like a florist, like a flower person, because, you know, they come from money. And I was just like, okay, that's a little weird, out of nowhere. She has no friends in London. She's explaining all of that. And she asks Louise, well, what happened to your arm? Oh, it's nothing. Just a night terror, nightmares. Huh. Night terrors. You have night terrors? Yeah, but it's never that scary until I wake up, I guess. Well, I mean, I guess it's scary when I'm dreaming, but huh. How often do you have night terrors? And that's when David calls Adele. So she picks up the phone and she completely lies. So she does not tell David that she's getting coffee with his secretary or met his secretary. She just says, I went to go get some paint samples and now I'm drinking some coffee and I'm going to be home soon. And Louise is listening to all of this, so she hangs up her phone, and Adele asks Louise for her phone number and mentions to Louise that maybe we don't tell your boss this, maybe we don't tell David this because, you know, he's a little weird about mixing home life and work life together, so it'll be our little secret. So she gets Louise's number, and Louise is freaked out during all of this. Like the whole time during this little coffee chat, you can see that Louise is uncomfortable. She doesn't want to be here. And so as she's leaving, now Adele has her number, she's like, dude, like, what did I just get myself into? She gets a text message. And it's me, Adele. And she turns around, and it's Adele, like, waving from the coffee shop still inside.
I don't like
just
that.
Seems really, like, clingy. So Louise is like, oh, fork. Like, This is the worst case scenario. What is this?
Instant regret.
Instant regret. So Adele goes home, and she drops all of her meds into the sink while she's, like, humming. Like, really crazy woman vibes, right? So she's dropping her meds, and she's waiting on calls. She's thinking about Louise, thinking about the coffee date. And she gets a phone call on the landline. She picks it up. And it's David checking in on her, again, asking her if she took her meds, again. And she says, yes, I absolutely did. And he's like, well, I'm going to be home late because I'm going to go do some addict work. Like, I'm going to go hit these communities and try to talk to some people, all of that jazz. And she asks him, do you ever think about what they think of you? What are you talking about, Adele? Do you ever think maybe they think you're annoying? Maybe they don't want to stop doing drugs? Well, Adele, I guess that would suck because that's my life's work. Well, I was just saying. Anyways, love you. And he just hangs up. So during all of this, he like never says I love you back. So she's like, bye, love you. He never says it back. And this kind of triggered Adele. She hangs up the phone and she immediately goes into her room, her bedroom that she shares with her husband, David, and she starts painting a bunch of samples. She's got these like sage greens, dark greens. She had some blues, and she's looking at the wall of samples and she's getting angry. She's like having flashbacks to David, like, you know, making her take pills and all this shit. And she just starts angrily painting the wall. When she's done, she takes a look back and we see that she painted an intense forest on the wall. Like, I'm talking a whole ass Bob Ross painting on her wall. And we get a little flashback at the end of the episode to there's a well inside of this forest. It seems like it's a real place that she painted, not just like, ooh, I like trees, right? Mm-hmm. And inside of that well, there's a dead body. So she paints this. She's content with herself, okay? And then she lays back on her bed like a little psychopath. I'm sorry. I just think it's crazy. Shoes on the bed, on top of your covers with your little bob. I'd be alarmed. She lays back onto her bed and she has more flashbacks about the mental hospital. So for me, it kind of feels like maybe she loved Rob, but for whatever reason, she ended up marrying David and like that pissed her off or something because she has all of these really fond memories of Rob. So there was an instance where, you know, her and Rob are talking and someone comes out and says, hey, you've got a phone call, and it's a nurse. And she's like, who is it? It's David. And she's like, oh, exciting. So it seems that she knew David since she was young. So she rushes to answer the phone call and she's like, David, I miss you, right? And the nurse even tells Rob, like, don't even try. Girls like her never marry someone like you. And just like walks away. And Rob jokingly tells the nurse, well, don't worry, I like dicks anyway. So he's like jokingly telling the nurse, like, I'm not even into girls, so fork you, lady, you know, because that's a really rude thing for her to say, right? Yeah. And so she's talking on the phone with David and she's saying, listen, I'm so excited. I made a friend. And it's nice because I feel like we're both helping each other and I'm helping him with his night terrors. He's helping me get through things. And it just feels nice to like have someone to talk to in here. So David's like, should I be worried that you just like met this guy in the hospital and he's your best friend? And she's like, no, you're so silly. I can't wait for you guys to meet. Once we get out of here, you guys are going to meet and you guys are going to be best friends too. And it just seems like a really cute relationship almost. And she hangs up the phone and that was her flashback. So immediately she wakes up from her little psychopathic sleep and she's like, oh my God. She rummages into her closet and starts looking for something and she finds it. Inside of a box, there's this red notebook and it seems like it was Rob's notebook, and the first page she reads it out loud. It said something along the lines of I pinch myself, I count all my fingers, I look at my watch, I look away, and I imagine a door. So she's like loving this notebook, okay? Maybe it was like a love letter from Rob to Adele and she's like reminiscing about her past, right? So she takes this notebook and David comes home and she says, David, I'd love to show you what I painted our room with. And she drags him upstairs and he takes one look at the forest painting and you can immediately sense that something is off because he says, why would you do this? What's wrong with you? Why would you do this? And he just leaves. So David goes to work the next day and he's in a pissy mood because that forest really pissed him off. So he goes to work, he's yelling at everyone, all the receptionists. You know, when Louise comes in, they're like, don't go into Dr. Ferguson's room. Like, seriously, don't do it. He's like in a really shitty mood. Just give him his, like, email him. Don't talk to him. And she's like, why? Why is he in a shitty mood? Well, I gotta give him the files for the next patient. So she knocks on the door, opens it, and she places the files on the, desk. And she sees that the picture of him and Adele that's on his desk is flipped down. So she just picks it up because she thought maybe there was a mistake. It got knocked over. And he says, just leave it. She's like, all right, geez, Louise, like, what's wrong with you? And as she's about to leave, he's like, why don't you knock next time? And she's like, all right, you asshole. I did. I literally knocked. Sorry, next time I'll wait to be summoned into your office. And she, like, slams the door shut because, like, that's so freaking rude, right? And so she sits down and she sees that she has these text messages from Adele asking her to go to the gym. And it seems like originally Louise was just going to ignore the shit out of her and try to just cut that relationship off because how weird. But with that interaction of David being such an asshole, she was like, you know what? I am gonna go to the gym with his wife. So she texts her back and is like, yes, Adele, I would love to go to the gym with you. So Adele's like, great, I'll pick you up. What's your address? So Louise goes home after work and she's like frantically cleaning up her apartment. She's like getting stuff ready and she's like looking around like, oh God, like this doesn't look good. And Adele comes knocking on the door and she's allowed in. And Adele, what's interesting about this is that she's saying all the right things. She's saying, I love your house. It's so cozy. It's like a home, like a real home. But she's looking around too intently. Like she'll walk to the kitchen and Louise is like, oh, let me just grab my stuff from my bedroom. Mm-hmm. And you see Adele walking from the kitchen to the bathroom. She even opened up her son's room, Adam's room, and looked in there, went into Louise's room behind her and looked around a little bit. So she seems incredibly nosy, like something weird is going on here, right? And so Louise is like, all right, are you ready? So they hit the gym together and they start going to the sauna afterwards. And that's where a lot of shit starts happening. So this is the first time Adele actually opens up about all of this to Louise. She starts talking about her marriage with David, having no idea that Louise made out with David or any of that. And she's like, well, I got married when I was 18 and that was like 10 10 years ago. His parents, they ran the farm on our estate, so they worked for us. And yeah, it was interesting because when I was 17, there was a fire inside of our castle and we were all asleep. And it was on the wing where my parents slept because, castles have wings. And I slept on the east wing, they were on the west wing. And the fire broke out in the middle of the night. And I don't think they really stood a chance, but I got woken up by David, who had seen the fire, and he dragged me out. And both of my parents died in the fire. And, even David, he was burned pretty badly all over his arms. And yeah, I'm really lucky to be alive. So Louise is like, oh shit, like that's crazy. Like, I'm so sorry. And Adele's like, it's fine. Well, do you want to get some pizza or something or a salad? And she's like, yeah, like let's go get lunch. So as they're leaving the gym, Adele looks at her clock and realizes, oh my God, the time is slipping. I thought it was, okay. Do you mind if we just do lunch at my place? I need to be home. I need to be home by 2:30. We can just do a light snack and I can drop you off afterwards. So Louise is like, yeah, I guess that's fine. So they drive over to the Ferguson's house and it's this beautiful house and Louise is shook. Like she's looking around like, holy cow. I mean, this is probably way more than what David could afford because like I said, Adele comes from a ton of money, right? Like this looks like that type of house. Like not just like, oh, I'm a psychiatrist. Like here's my house, right? It looked like this is a rich person's house, like a rich person's house. So she's just looking around like, holy cow. And she's like making lunch and they get a call on the landline. So Adele picks it up and starts talking. And Louise is confused by this. Immediately after Adele hangs up the phone, Louise is like, does he call you on the landline every day to make sure you're home? Yeah, but it's no big deal. And Louise is like, what? That's just so weird. Like, you're almost 30. Like, why is he so possessive? And if he's so possessive, why is he making out with people at the bar, But she doesn't say this. She's just like, that's fucking weird. And so they start eating in their little garden, and Adele keeps asking about the night terrors again. Adele's like, tell me more about your dreams. Did you ever try to get help from it? Did you see a doctor? Did you see a therapist? And Louise is just saying, listen, no therapist wants to listen to my night terrors because the thing with night terrors is they say that you can't really remember them when you wake up. So they think that maybe I'm not having night terrors and sleepwalking because most people don't remember their sleepwalking, but I do. I remember it all. I remember every detail, and it's just a lot, and no one thinks there's something wrong with me. And Adele tells her, well, I think they're wrong because I used to have night terrors too, and I remember every single one of them. And she looks at Louise and she says, you and me, Louise, we're special. We're different. And so she gives her a red notebook, the one that she had digged up that was written by Rob, and says, this is everything that you need to know. Everything you need to know to stop the night terrors is in this book, and this helped me. And she even says, what's even crazier is that you can even choose your dreams, Louise. You can choose what you dream about, whatever you want. It's called lucid dreaming, and it works. I did it. But you have to have an open mind. And Louise is just kind of like sitting there like, what? And so Adele gets embarrassed and she's like, oh my God, okay, it's fine. I don't want you to think I'm like part of a cult or anything. Like, it's just, I just wanted to help. You don't have to, you must think I'm freaking crazy or something. And Louise is like, no. Seriously, it's not. Like, when my mom passed away, I went to a clairvoyant and she knew things about my mom. She knew things about my mom that she shouldn't have known. Nobody told her. I didn't tell her anything. And she knew all of these things. So trust me, I don't think you're crazy. I don't think you're in a cult. I believe that these things are really real. And thank you. I'm gonna try to practice. So she takes the notebook home and she's sitting on her couch and she goes through all of this and she's getting ready for Adam to go to France. So there's just a lot going on in Louise's life. She's like trying to start lucid dreaming. Her son's going away for a month. She doesn't even know what she's gonna do for a month. Like, she's only been with her son for 7 years. Like, what is she gonna do all of a sudden? So Adam leaves, his dad picks him up, and she's reading this notebook on the couch, and she's reading from Rob's perspective. So not only is it kind of like a guide on how to lucid dream, but it's really about Robert's life while he was in this mental institution. So Rob is talking about how he really wants to fix himself. He wants to fix himself for Adele. He would do anything for Adele, honestly. And he's writing about how much he loves her, and she's just different. There's something about her. She's just so alive. and just beautiful and so kind. And I don't know, there's just something about Adele. So he starts talking about his dreams, and he always has the same one almost every single time, just like Louise, which is the fact that he's in this abandoned building and all of these drugged up people, like they look like those posters for Don't Do Drugs, where they've got like patches on their face, but almost mixed with a zombie, so exaggerated, and they're just chasing after him. And he starts screaming and screaming and screaming, and he can't even get the image out of his head that when he's not even in deep sleep, the minute that he closes his eyes, that's the first thing that he thinks about. And it's just terrifying. And so she's reading all of this, and she gets a knock on the door. So she's like, what the fork? So she opens it, and it's David. And David is like, I was in the area. I just wanted to check in. You called out sick today. And she's like, okay, sorry. I wasn't really sick. My son is leaving for France today. He just got picked up, and I just wanted to spend some extra time with him. Sorry, I'm not really sick. Don't fire me. And he's like, that's okay. That's okay. So she's like, do you want to come in? Maybe for a glass of wine? So they sit down and they start drinking some JuneShine. Not really, but they should be. And David is being an asshole because he's all like, I'm so glad that I met you. Like, have you ever thought about it? We make each other laugh. I don't remember the last time I laughed like this with anyone. I mean, get a grip, get a divorce, go home to your wife, dude. And so she's like, yeah, but that wasn't fate. Like, us meeting at the bar was not fate. That kind of ruined everything, And so he's like, no, I'm serious. Think about it. Did you ever feel like this with anyone? And she's like, all right, I think you should go. So she leads him to the door, and they're both saying bye to each other, but of course they don't, because they start making out.
No.
And they eventually full on do it.
Come on.
So then we have like literally the next 2 episodes of just the parallels of David and Louise getting closer together, them constantly doing it, but also Louise being like, no, we can't do this. You're married. You're my boss. But also like I had a relationship where I was cheated on. My ex-husband cheated on me with someone from work. So we really can't do this. Meanwhile, David is like, no, we've got to do this. You're the only one that makes me happy. My wife is nothing. And Adele, on the other hand, she's sitting at home cooking 5-course meals, waiting for her husband to get home. She's just like sitting at the dining table and just waiting, and then he'll open the door and he won't even realize that she's sitting there, and she'll be like, please, let's eat dinner. We haven't shared a meal in forever. And he's just like, no, too tired, and we'll just walk up the stairs. And they start getting into arguments, and she would keep asking him, which I think is very interesting, is it happening again? Is it happening again? So does that mean, is he always having affairs, or is he doing something that's like making them get into a tense relationship? But Adele would ask David, is it happening again? And David gets so defensive and so mad and says, I don't know, Adele, you tell me. Are we gonna move somewhere new again? Do I need to find a new fucking job now? And just like runs up the stairs again. Now, meanwhile, all of that back and forth is happening. Adele is texting Louise like, hey, you're kind of ghosting me. Like, what's wrong? I thought we had a really, really good time at the gym the other day. Is everything okay? Like, did I do something to offend you? Like, what's going on? And Louise, with all that guilt, all that shame, but also probably the uncomfortableness, she keeps rejecting her text. She's like, I don't want to text her back. I don't know what to do. She's just like, I'm just going to put my phone away. And she starts noticing, like, maybe something's weird. So now that she's getting into this weird relationship with David, she's concerned about some of the things that Adele was saying about David, about that he calls the landline every day to make sure that she's home, like just weird stuff. And I think maybe the curiosity gets the best of her, because when you work in like that office environment, she can actually pick up the phone and listen to any of the calls that David has, because she's the secretary. She can transfer people to his line, she can listen. And so she starts listening every time he calls Adele when she's supposed to be home.
At 2:30.
Yes, at 2:30 p.m. And this phone conversation was just really strange. It seemed like Adele was the right one. Like, Adele is the nice person. The whole time she's like, hey, I'm just went to the gym today. This is what I did. And David's like, do I need to adjust your meds again? And she's like, no, I feel good. And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. And so she's like, no, seriously, I'm okay. You don't need to do that. Just, what, are you going to be home for dinner? And he's like, no, I'm going to be working late. okay, well, love you. And he just hangs up on her. So now Louise is like, okay, like, who am I getting in bed with? Literally, like, why is this guy like this? Is he going to start treating me like this in like a week? Like, is he just this type of douche? So she texts Adele back because she wants more information. And she says, hey, sorry, just a busy week. Like, let's meet up. So they meet up for lunch and they start talking. And Adele is like, I just don't know what's going on with my husband. I know it's weird that I'm talking to you about your boss and I'm your boss's wife, but I don't have any friends in London and it's just weird. I'm worried about him. He's just drinking a lot more than he normally does. He feels really stressed and just detached. And is there something going on at work? And, Louise is uncomfortable. She's like, no, maybe it's just stress. And Adele's like, yeah, I mean, he doesn't even sleep in our room anymore. Like, I just don't know what's going on. And so she's like, I'm glad that we're friends, though. I finally have someone to talk about. And Louise is like, yeah, me too. Fucking Louise, girl, get out of there. And so Louise goes home, and David and Adele, they have more adjustments to their meds. He's making sure she's taking all her meds, checking her mouth, all of that jazz, right? But she's getting smarter. So Adele, after she takes her new medication, he leaves for work. She immediately throws up into the sink so that she doesn't have that, metabolize in her body. So it seems like she's on to him. Meanwhile, Louise is in this great mental debate. So she's talking to her best friend, Sophie, and her best friend's like, whatever's happening, you need to get out of this because it's not going to end right for you. There's going to be someone who loses and it's going to be you. They're a married couple. Like, you're going to get hurt from this. Like, why are you even, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And for some reason, Louise says, I don't know. The weirdest thing is I like them both. It's weird. Like, I like David. He seems lonely and sad, and it seems like he's unhappy in the marriage. But I know that he can be happy. I mean, he's a very funny person. Whereas Adele, on the other hand, she's kind and she's generous, and you would think that she wouldn't be, but she's also really lonely. So I don't know. I'm just kind of drawn to both of them. So Louise continues on her affair, and this is one part that's kind of important. So she's in bed with David, and she sees all of the burns on his arms because David had pulled Adele out of the fire. Remember that I said that? And she asks, acting like she don't know shit. She's like, what happened to your arm? And he's like, there's a fire. That's it? Just there's a fire? Like, come on, what happened to your arm? And he says, well, I saw a fire in someone's house, and I helped save a girl. Yeah. What happened to that girl? Oh, I don't really know. You saved a girl out of a burning house and you never followed up on her? No. So Louise goes to sleep and she starts now incorporating all of this into her nightmares. Now she's having nightmares of her mom, taking her life, probably is what it's insinuated, and then her son being trapped in walls, and then every time she opens a door in this long hallway looking for her son while he's screaming, Mom, help, please. Now she opens it and she sees Adele burning in a room. And then she opens another one and she sees David burning in a room. And it's just too much going on.
She hasn't learned lucid dreaming?
Not yet. She's reading the notebook, but she still isn't capable of doing it yet, She's still having these nightmares. Meanwhile, Adele is doing some suspicious ass shit, okay? So she's laying in her bed with her shoes on, psychopathic, and I'm kidding. I'm sorry if you lay in your bed with shoes on, but it's really unhygienic and unsanitary. Don't do it. But you're not a psychopath. But she might be. So she's laying in her bed and she's having more flashbacks to her being at the mental institution. So this one is her inside of this boardroom with all of these dudes in suits, and she's signing a bunch of papers, and she comes out and she sees Rob, and Rob's like, what were you doing in there? Like, are you leaving soon? And she's like, no, not yet. I haven't been, ready to go yet, but there's just a lot going on. I'm underage, and the taxes for the property were due, and just like the maintenance, I think the bills were piling up, so I just signed some things under David. He's like, what? Huh. You just signed over millions of pounds to David? It's just easier this way. By the way, I trust David. He'll always take care of me. We're gonna get married.
She say that?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I know, Adele, but don't you think it's weird? Don't you think you should have at least waited till you got out of here to sign some things under his name? No, Rob, he's not. Just wait till you meet David. He's not like that. Besides, I'm wearing his watch right now. So Adele was wearing this really big men's watch, like a nice watch, a beautiful watch. And she said, I'm wearing his watch.
What is it?
I think it was like a Rolex. And she's like, I'm wearing it because he can't put it on. Because he has skin grafts. Because he saved me from the fire. Trust me, David is not trying to take advantage of me. Now, whatever this flashback did to Adele, she got really pissed because she woke up from her little flashback and she decides to start going into these very, very dangerous areas of London. And you can see these people sitting outside, transferring money, transferring little things, like they're drug dealing, okay, over there. And she's looking around and she's trying to talk to people, like trying to buy some drugs, I think. And everyone's just walking away because she looks like a prim proper lady, or she looks like a cop. Like, it's just, you don't really see that in this neighborhood. So everyone's like, bye. So she approaches a girl and she's like, do you know where I can buy some heroin? And that girl just straight up punches her in the face for whatever reason. So she goes home with this ginormous black eye, huge. David comes, he's freaking out, and she's like, no, I opened the little kitchen cabinet and I wasn't looking. I was just moving too fast and it poked me in the eye. And he was just like, okay, well, I'll get you some painkillers. And he's leaving. And she's like, wait, since you already took the time off of work, why don't we just spend the day together? And he's like, no, Adele, I'm just gonna go back to work. And she's like, yeah, you're right. Go save a bunch of other people. And what about your marriage? Who cares? There's always more meds for all of that. And so he just looks at her and he's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't control you anymore. What's wrong with you, Adele? And she says, well, you know that you can never leave though, right? Because we have secrets. Things that we can never tell anyone else. It's just you and me, David. You know that, right? You know you can never leave, right, David? Freaking creepy. So this is where the shit show starts happening. So Louise is actually able to start lucid dreaming at this point. So she's pinching herself, she's counting her fingers, she's looking at a watch or a clock, looking away, and she keeps imagining this door. Now, once she opens that door, instead of seeing people burning, instead of seeing her son dying, she sees her old childhood home, but everything's perfect. Like, you know how you would imagine it, like the sun is shining. It almost looks like a cartoon because everything's perfect. And she's eating some apple pie. She goes out into the backyard. Her son is playing in the backyard. David's barbecuing over there. And it just seems like the perfect life. And so she's able to control her dreams now. Meanwhile, David is having some problems with Anthony, who is a patient that he's like an addict. So he's trying to recover. He's trying to, he was turned in by his parents to the therapist. So Anthony somehow gets David's address because David had a ton of patients and he didn't have any openings for Anthony recently. So Anthony finds David's address, comes to the house to try to get some help. He's like, where's Dr. Ferguson? He promised me he would help me and I need help, right? And now David wasn't home, but Adele was. So she opens it and she's only showing half her face. And she's like, who are you? I'm Anthony. Is your husband home? Is he Dr. David? He promised he would help me. He promised he would help me and he's not in the office. And she comes fully into the door frame and she's got that black eye. And it's looking very suspicious. And she's like, he's not home. Are you sure? Yes, you need to leave. Are you okay, ma'am? Yes, you need to leave. Did he hurt you? Do you need help? Yes. So he scatters off. I don't know what he's gonna do. We're gonna find out in a little bit. So Adele is now setting it up to take her own husband down. I don't know. It's just all sorts of weird. Now Adele, with her black eye, she goes to pick up Louise and Louise is like, what's going on with your eye? And she's like, oh, it was just an incident. Don't worry about it. And they go jogging in a park and Louise tells Adele that she finally started lucid dreaming and Adele is really excited for her. So the next day Louise goes to work and Anthony and his parents are talking to the boss, the main boss, the one that's even in charge of David, right? And they come out and she's asking all of the other receptionists what's going on? Why are they in there together? And they're just oh, I don't know, something about Dr. Ferguson must be serious because they're getting him involved, the main doctor. And she's just waiting there and she sees the main doctor walk out the family. Anthony walks out and he goes into Dr. David's office and they start having this intense conversation. And then she sees that someone had picked up the phone. So she starts listening to their phone conversation. And the doctor, the main boss doctor, called Adele in front of Dr. David. And he says, listen, a patient came in here saying that you needed help. He came to your house and he's saying that you said that he beat you. And he gets quiet on the line. And then she waits and Adele says, oh my gosh, that's insane. Oh no, oh God, no, David has been so sweet. I think the only problem is that he married someone who's so clumsy. I really genuinely just hurt myself on the kitchen cabinet. Man, I didn't tell anyone that a patient stopped by because I didn't want him to get in trouble. I didn't want to get him, dropped from David's patient list, especially when it seemed like he needed a lot of help. But no, I don't know what he thought he saw, but definitely not. David would never.
Does she sound suspicious?
No, she sounds sincere.
Okay.
It's like really weird.
Okay.
And so Louise is a little suspicious, but the main boss is like, yeah, okay, well, we know how patients can be. And he hangs up the phone and everything seems to be okay again. Now, later we'll see that Adele meets up with Anthony, the patient, in a park, and he gives her a bunch of heroin. She just is like trying to explain that maybe her husband is abusive. The only thing that can get her through is some heroin. So it seems like she's doing drugs. I don't know. There's just a lot going on with Adele. Meanwhile, Louise, she's getting really uncomfortable. She's having this affair. She's friends with Adele, but also she's having these weird suspicions about the person that she's having this affair with. And she even straight up asked David, did you punch your wife in the face? And he's like, no, I don't believe that she hit herself with a kitchen cabinet. And you don't believe that I didn't punch her. So you know what? If you think that I would punch her, then this isn't even, they get into a huge fight, right? So Louise is like, whatever, fork you. She goes back home and she starts reading Rob's journal. And in this journal, Rob is just voicing a lot of concerns about David, which is making things worse for Louise, and saying things like, it doesn't make sense, he doesn't want Adele to leave because inside the mental institution, they're equals. They wear the same clothes, they do the same activities, they eat the same food. But the minute that she leaves, she constantly says that they're gonna be friends, even outside, but that's just not how the real world works. She'd be disgusted if she saw me in the real world. So I'm kind of sad about her leaving, but on top of that, something's just not right with David. I mean, did he really just happen to see the house on fire in the middle of the night and then just saved Adele and now he has all of her money? Like, something's just not adding up. And so she's reading this and she's like, something's not adding up. Okay, now this is where I might lose a bunch of people. So Adele starts lucid dreaming. So you can tell that Adele lucid dreams. So Louise is now learning lucid dreaming, but Adele has already, she's done it. She lucid dreams and she's dreaming, but she is now inside of David's office and she's hearing David confess his love to Louise. Now, this makes you kind of question, like, is she actually there? Did this scene actually happen? Or is this all like a dream? And Adele knows that they're doing it. Like, what's going on? Is this her suspicions that turned into a nightmare? It's just all sorts of weird. And so that day, she rushes to the gym and she tells the gym staff, hey, like, my name is Adele Ferguson, and I would love to add an extended membership for my good friend Louise. And so they said, okay, like, we have to do some paperwork. Do you mind if we call you at a later time to finish up the paperwork? And she says, call me anytime after 6. So she goes home. She starts prepping dinner. And the landline starts ringing. And she doesn't pick it up. And David's home. So he picks it up. And they say, hi, we're at the local gym. And we were just trying to confirm the extra membership for Louise Barnsley. And David's looking at the phone like, what the fork? An extra membership for who? Louise Barnsley? Why are you calling us about it? Well, it was requested by Adele. So now he's learning that they're fucking friends.
Did Adele do this on purpose?
Yes, it seems like it. So he immediately storms downstairs and he sees Adele cooking. He goes behind her. She stays cooking. And he goes through her phone and sees all of the text messages with Louise. So he rushes out and Adele is smiling.
What?
So he rushes straight to Louise's house and he's just like breaking up with her. He's like, you're disgusting. Like, do you know how crazy you look right now? Like, you look freaking crazy. Like, we're having this affair. Yeah, this is bad. But you befriended my wife. You don't know anything about our marriage. Stay out of our lives. Stay out of our marriage. Jesus Christ.
He didn't blow up on the wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think he already hated the wife. But, like, he thought Louise was different, and now he's finding out that Louise is, like, this really weird...
You're the one cheating.
I know. Moral high horse. And so he fires her at that moment. And he was like, yeah, you're fired. And don't you dare try to tell the boss about this affair or anything, because I have all those text messages. And do you know how that will look to future employers? that we had an affair and you got with my wife and like we're trying to befriend her? You're insane, Louise. And he just like leaves super angry. So now Louise's life is falling apart and she just went to Adele's house. Now, I'm not entirely sure why she went back to their house. I don't know, maybe she wanted to talk to Adele about what's been going on. Whatever the case may be. She shows up at the house, she starts knocking on the door and nobody's answering the door. Now, it's around 2:30 p.m. She should be home. Like, she knows she should be home. So she starts kind of like peeking through the window that's right next to the front door and she sees Adele just like knocked out on a couch like this, but it didn't seem like she's napping. So she starts freaking out and banging on the window like, Adele, are you okay? And I think maybe her trauma of having lost a loved one, she starts panicking and she breaks a glass open, unlocks the door, rushes inside, and she starts shaking Adele. And Adele won't wake up and shaking her more. And then all of a sudden Adele wakes up and says, Louise, what are you doing here? And she's like, what? I thought you were dead. Like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, no, I'm just on some new meds and they make me a little sleepy. So she's like, okay, well, do you want some tea, Louise? And so they go and they start drinking some tea in the kitchen. And I think it seems like Louise is trying to tell her about the affair, like just trying to come clean about everything. And the first thing that she leads with is that she was fired from her job. And she's like, oh my God, Louise, don't. I will talk to David about it. I don't know what's going on in his mind. I mean, that's insane. Why would he fire you? That's crazy. And she's like, well, it's not really crazy. The truth is, and Adele just bonks her head. And she's like, what were you saying?
What do you mean bonks her head?
Just like bonks her head. And she's like, what were you saying? And so Louise is like, what meds are you on? And she's like, I don't know. I got some new meds there in my medicine cabinet. They're making me a little fuzzy. So Louise is like, where's your medicine cabinet? And she walks over, she opens it up, and she's like, oh my God, Adele, these are all really intense sedatives. Why are you on so many sedatives? And Adele's like, they're for my anxiety, I think. Adele, this isn't normal. Like, no one's gonna put you on like fucking horse sedatives for anxiety. Well, I don't know. He handles all of that. And so Louise sits down and she's like, okay, Adele, when did this all start? I think I started going on meds when we were in Brighton. He had an affair with this lady. Her name's Marianne. And she ran this little coffee shop called the Cozy Cafe. Yeah, it's really cozy, all right. And we just moved after the affair to get a fresh start. And then I got more meds, and it seems like it's not really a fresh start. He just doesn't even want to be home. And Louise is like, you just need to leave him, Adele. This doesn't make sense. Like, I know that you don't work, but you've got money, and, I mean, none of this makes sense, Adele. Louise, it's not that simple. It's complicated. He's got a whole file on me, you know? A whole giant file. And with my history of my parents dying, with me being institutionalized, and, you know, he's a psychiatrist, so he can write whatever he wants on his file about my mental state. There's no way. There's no way he's going to let me leave. There's no way he's going to let me take some money. I'm just going to be in a mental institution if I try to leave him. And I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe that's what's wrong with me. So at the end of the episode, we see Rob at the bottom of the well. Just like, there's no flashback, nothing. It's just Rob at the bottom of the well with the watch that was supposed to be David's. The Rolex.
He's wearing it?
No.
Oh, the watch is also through into it.
So he's just at the bottom of the well. So he's dead. Now, Adele, during all of this, I don't know if she started having like a mental breakdown, but she starts doing heroin. Mm-hmm. And so anytime David would go to work, he starts doing heroin. Louise, she's just really concerned about Adele. She thinks that David is like this evil, just protective, probably like this money scammer. According to Rob's journal, I mean, everything was signed over to David. He's a psychiatrist. He keeps a file on his wife. I mean, there's so many different ethical reasons why you shouldn't do that. So Louise decides she still has the key to the office. She never turned it in. So she runs to the office in the middle of the night. She disarms the alarm system and she goes through his desk and gets the thick ass file about Adele, and she brings it straight to Adele. It's the last 10 years of her medical history, her mental health history, all of that jazz. And Adele asks her if she read anything in it. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, I mean, I just made sure that it was your file, but I didn't like read every page or anything. And Adele is like, wow, thank you. Thank you for bringing me this. And she says, well, I did read one thing. Louise tells her that she read one part of it from a couple years back, and it just said that Marianne decided not to press charges, thank God. So why would the person that, he had an affair with press charges? And Adele says, I confronted her. I found out about the affair. I went to her cafe and I confronted her. Wouldn't you? I feel like anyone would. And she said that I was harassing her. And so we just moved. We wanted to get a clean start, but it wasn't really a clean start. Can I show you something, Louise? And so she brings Louise upstairs to see the giant forest painting. And she's looking at it and she says, that's the back of our estate, the castle. And I loved it there. I wish I could go back. It's in Scotland and it's beautiful. Just so much fresh air, so many beautiful trees. Well, why don't you go back? I don't know. David refuses to sell the property and he refuses to even visit. So it's just sitting there. I think it's because David killed Rob. And so Louise is like, wait, what? The Rob that I'm reading his notebook? It doesn't make sense. So after I got out of the mental hospital and Rob got out, he said that he was going to visit me, and I was so excited, and they were going to finally meet each other, and they are the most two important people in my entire life. So I'm at the castle, I'm at the estate, I'm getting things ready. Rob gets there. We spent like a week together, and then David, he came from uni, because university, so he was in school, so he came. We spent the entire week together, and I woke up one morning, and David said that Rob just left. And that didn't make sense because he was supposed to stay for another week. I told him he could stay as long as he wanted. And Rob would never just leave. He didn't even say bye. He didn't even wait till I woke up. Like, why would he just leave? I tried to find him. I tried to hire people to track him down. And no one could find Rob after that. He just vanished. And so Louise goes back home thinking, did I just sleep with a man who's married, but also a killer? What the fork? So she goes home, she starts lucid dreaming. And during this dream, she finds herself watching her son sleep, like in her dream. And she noticed that on the nightstand, his cup was tipped over and there was just water dripping on his nightstand. And she's thinking about it and she wakes up all of a sudden. Now, what's interesting is you get this weird camera perspective of it seems like someone is watching Louise. It's no longer like a regular TV show shooting. It seems like someone's watching Louise. So Louise is looking around and she goes into her son's room just to check on him, and she sees the cup is tipped over. And she's like, that's really weird.
Where's the son?
Sleeping, but the cup is tipped over, just like in her dream. And so she goes onto the computer and she starts looking up Rob. She's trying to get in contact with him, make sure that he's alive and he's not dead somewhere. And nobody can find him. Nobody has any contact with him, right? And meanwhile, Adele and David are going through a shit show. So David finds out that the file was stolen. He confronts Louise. Louise tells him that she gave it to Adele. So he confronts Adele and he keeps telling her, how do you always seem to know things that you're not supposed to know? So this to the audience is kind of insinuating like maybe this whole lucid dreaming, you can be in a place in real time in your dream. Because the whole thing with Louise, her son, she saw the nightstand. There was water tipped over. She goes to check up on him. There's water tipped over. It's not that she just...
So it's like a superpower?
Yeah, almost. Like astral projection, that's what they call it, where your soul leaves your body and you can travel in your soul, but your body stays where it is. So she's like a little bit confused. David is insinuating that Adele knows way too much than she actually should, and he says that he wants to divorce her. And she gets super pissed and she's like, you can never leave. Now we get another flashback to Adele and Rob, and they are lucid dreaming together. So he comes to the castle. He's amazed at everything. Like, it's kind of like a really wholesome moment. He's like, Adele, this is insane. And she's like, yeah, but like you can stay as long as you want. I've got the whole place to ourselves. It'll be fun, she really doesn't care. And Rob was like, no, it's like, I don't want to overstay my welcome. And he's looking around and he's like, people live like this? And she's like, come. So they have this little room with 2 twin beds and they lay there and they start dreaming, right? They start practicing their lucid dreaming. And she says, I want to show you something interesting. I haven't been able to do this with anyone else, but I think you're the only one that I would ever want to. And you're the only one that I think that can. But it's called astro projecting. And so they lay in bed and you see something leave their body.
So now it's turning into a...
Yeah. And traveling through the castle. So they wake up and you see the souls entering their body again. And they wake up and he's like, that was fucking gnarly. And she's like, yeah, it's crazy, no? And they're like spending the rest of the week together. So they're waiting for David to come home from university, but they're just enjoying their time, right? And he's Googling astral projecting. And he's like, okay, so it means when a soul separates from your physical form and you can maybe travel or be in two places at once. But obviously your body's still sleeping. So the show doesn't really go in depth about it. The only rules are that you have to have been there before to visualize where you're going, like where your soul is going. Like it can't just be like, oh, I'm going to Paris when you've never been to Paris, right? Like you have to have been there before. You have to have seen it before. And it's like a muscle. So in the beginning, it's a little bit slower. You can only go so far. And then eventually you can go further. And that's when Adele confesses to Rob and says that the night that her parents died, she probably would have been able to save them. But she had learned astral projecting when she was really young, and she was never allowed out of the castle. And so she would use it anytime she would go with her parents. She would look around, and at night she would astral project, and she would go to these places just to see like how other families live and what people are doing out there. And it takes time for her soul to come back into her body. And because of that difference in time, she didn't wake up before it was too late.
And that's what she was looking around at Louise's house.
So what about David? Does he know? No, he's like way too practical. He like wants to be a doctor. And I don't want to worry him. I feel like he's going to think I'm crazy. And Rob's like, well, I don't think you're crazy. And so they start lucid dreaming together. They start trying to practice astral projecting together. And then finally, David comes to the castle. He's done with university. And he drives up and, Adele runs into his arms and she introduces him to Rob. And Rob, you can tell he's almost like, God, this guy's handsome. Like he looks like Christian Grey. And he's like kind of nervous, it seems like, and shocked and just shaking his hand. And they immediately start hitting it off. So all of them are cooking dinner together. They're just having fun. And, Rob would say things like, I was really worried and I thought maybe you wouldn't like me. And David's like, well, I was worried too. Like if you get a call from your girlfriend saying she just met an amazing guy, but you seem really nice. And he was like, yeah, and I thought you were just a shitty bloke, like just trying to get our money. But anyways, they just get along really well. And they even talked about maybe Rob can live in the castle with them and he can cook for them because they were going to hire someone. And it's better than Rob being like wherever, his family was. And he was like, I love that. And they were all just really, really ecstatic. Now, Louise, she starts calling around and she gets in contact with Rob's sister and asks about Rob. And she says, oh, God, I haven't seen him in maybe like 10 years. One day he left, said he was going to go visit a friend at a castle somewhere, stole some cash from our mom's purse, never came back. But honestly, he was not worth looking for. So she hangs up. And she immediately starts Googling about Adele. And what she finds is very interesting. A lot of police at the time and a lot of press were very suspicious about the whole situation, David and Adele. A suspicious fire. They thought it could be arson. I mean, a lot of press was questioning. He just happened to walk by and saw Adele. And there was a fire and saved Adele in this ginormous castle. I mean, how do you even know where people's rooms are, right? What made it even worse is that Adele's family disapproved of David and Adele's relationship, and David's family were going through financial hardship at the time. So the investigators were really convinced that this was not just a normal fire. So she finds out the main investigator's name from all of these press, and she starts mailing him a letter. She printed out a letter saying, you were investigating the fire at this massive castle. You thought farm boy David was a part of it. Well, let me tell you, there was a guy named Rob who went missing. I think he might be in that farm somewhere on the estate, his dead body, and I think maybe David killed him. So she mails this letter. She post-mails it.
Wait, Louise?
She's like getting involved in all of this.
She's trying to expose David.
So she mails this letter. She comes home and she falls asleep. And this time you see that Louise starts astral projecting without even wanting to. And she goes through her apartment and to her neighbor's apartment, who is also her babysitter. And she sees that her neighbor is watching TV, a specific show, wearing certain clothing, and she wakes up again. So her son actually is shaking her awake and she can hear, Mommy, please wake up, please wake up. And so her little soul travels from the neighbor's apartment back into her house, back into her body, and that's when she wakes wakes up and she's like, what's going on? And he's just saying, I don't know, like you fell asleep and then I woke up and you wouldn't wake up, Mommy. I was like so scared. Why wouldn't you wake up? And she's like, it's okay, sorry. And she,
oh my God, that's what
yeah,
Adele was doing.
And so she grabs her cup and she goes over to the neighbor's house and she asks, sorry, I ran out of coffee. Do you mind if I get some for tomorrow? And her neighbor's like, I only have the shitty kind. So she goes into her kitchen and she sees the same show is on. The neighbor is wearing the same clothes. Everything is in the same, like her remote is in the same part, everything. And so she takes the coffee. She goes back into her apartment and she starts remembering everything that she thought was just Adele's intuition. Did Adele seemed to know things. Adele came to her apartment. Adele that day when she was on the couch, I thought she was dead. Was she astro projecting?
Wait, did Adele teach her how to astral project? Why would Adele teach her that then?
You'll see. Oh my God. Adele probably knew who I was before we even bumped into each other. And so she's like, that lying bitch. So now Louise is going from being hating David to team David, I hate Adele. Because she's like, this bitch knew way more than she was saying. So this bitch she was setting me up for something. Maybe she wanted me to send this letter to the police. How do I even know that Rob is dead? What's going on? So she immediately tracks down Marianne. Because remember, she had mentioned the last person that he had an affair with was named Marianne. And she worked at a cafe called Cozy Cafe in Brighton. So she tracks down the Cozy Cafe in Brighton. She travels to Brighton and she says, are you Marianne? And she's working at the cafe. And she's like, yes. And she's like, please, can I talk to you about the Fergusons? Mm-hmm. She looks like she doesn't want to talk, but she sits outside and she says, Marianne tells Louise, the Fergusons, well, David, he came in first, and he was kind of like a regular. He would sit there every single morning with his coffee, and he just seemed really lonely, just really sad. And so obviously, being a regular, we all, started talking to him, all the employees, myself included, and he was really nice. And then eventually Adele came by, and I had no idea it was Adele at the time. She never mentioned, So I just thought it was another customer, and she would sit there drinking her peppermint tea. And it was almost like she was like studying the place. She's just really, really nosy maybe. And one day David comes back in and he starts asking me about, is it possible to know everything about someone but still not know who they are? And he just kept insinuating that he doesn't feel like he knows his wife. Like his wife is getting a little weird. So she was like, listen, you don't stay in a relationship if you're miserable. I gave him some friendly advice. I got out of my last relationship even though I was miserable because I tried to make it work, but it just doesn't work sometimes. Now that night, Adele showed up at my house. And I was confused. I opened the door. I said, who are you? Do I know you? I remembered her from the coffee shop. And I was like, do we know each other? You were at the coffee shop. And she just told me, stay out of my marriage. He belongs to me. Stop talking to him. Stop giving him advice. He doesn't need your advice. I know what you said to him, and you need to stay out of our lives. You're making it difficult. So she leaves, and I just thought it was kind of funny. Like, what's wrong with this girl? So then the next day, David shows up, acting like he has no idea about that conversation. He has no idea that his wife stopped out at my house, and he's just complaining about his wife some more. So I thought, you know what? Fuck it. Like, fuck this wife. And so I told him straight up, you need to leave your wife. She sounds toxic. And I go home that night, and all hell broke loose. I walk into my apartment, and the first thing that I normally do is I feed my cat. And I couldn't find my cat anywhere. And so I make my way upstairs, thinking my cat's upstairs, and in blood was slut written on the walls, and everything was overturned, furniture was broken. I mean, it was just a shit show. So then I get a knock on the door, and my cat was alive. I see my cat. I don't know where the blood was from. I get a knock on the door, and it's Adele. And Adele just says, it must be so scary living alone, because if someone wants to find a way in, they can find a way in. And if something happens to you, who's gonna feed your cat? Also, I think you lost this. And she hands her a kitchen knife from her own kitchen. And she walks away. So Marianne, she immediately calls David. She's like, I'm going to call the police right now, but I just thought you should know that your wife is about to get arrested because what the fork is wrong with her? She did all of this in my house. And David was like, please, please, please don't press charges. Like, we will just move away. We'll forget all of this happened. Please, please, please. There's just something wrong with my wife. I'll fix it. We'll move away. You'll never see from us. And she's like, no, absolutely not. That's not okay. I'm going to call the police. And that's when she said that David switched. He suddenly said, Well, it's your word against hers. There's no evidence, is there? So she was like, what is wrong with you? But she realized that David didn't seem evil. David seemed scared of his own wife. And she tells Louise, I don't know how you're involved with that couple, but you need to get out as fast as you can because there's something very wrong with that woman. And so Louise wants to meet back up with David, and they meet at a train station, which is interesting because it seems like a random train station that probably Adele has never been to. So they meet at a train station, and David's pissed. He's like, why are you even calling me? I want you out of my life, right? And Louise is like, listen, I think something's wrong with your wife. I think she's clinically insane. I think I know why she knows things that she's not supposed to know. And so Louise starts telling him all these crazy things. I met up with Marianne. She said all of these things. And she's like, and I know about Rob. And so we get Rob and David's flashback. So David has a flashback to him meeting Rob, and Rob seemed really into David, like just really, really sweet. Didn't seem to hate him at all. So I just don't know why David would have any incentive to kill Rob. Like that's kind of like the vibe that you get. And the one thing that was really odd is that Rob accidentally astral projected and saw David and Adele doing it. And he was just kind of like grossed out that he did that. And David, he gets a phone call one day while he's at university when he's super young, and it's from Adele. And he's frantically driving back to the castle, and she's crying. She meets him out front, and they walk into the kitchen, and she says, I just didn't know what to do. It was my first time. And he says, it's your first time what? I felt so shitty. Rob felt like he didn't belong here, and he started doing heroin. And I didn't know. He started doing heroin again because he was stressed out. He felt like we were gonna kick him out soon, and he asked me to do heroin with him, and it was my first time, and so I didn't want to make him feel shitty, so I did heroin, and then he overdosed. David asks Adele, like, do you think he overdosed? Your friend Rob overdosed on purpose? I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to be out. Maybe he wanted to continue to do drugs, but anyway, he overdosed, and I panicked, and I dragged his body into the well. And so he's like, we gotta call the cops. We have to call the police. And she says, no, we can't. While I was dragging his body into the well, the watch that I gifted you that I was wearing, it dropped into the well. And with my history, people are already looking at us at the suspicious fire. I was in the mental institution. Your watch is down there. They're gonna think that we killed him. They're gonna think that you killed him. And I don't want you to go to jail. And I don't want to go back to that mental hospital. And so David is actually having this flashback. So we see it happen, but he's kind of telling Louise what happened, right? So he's like, oh, well, I didn't kill Rob. Like, this is what happened to Rob. If anything, maybe Adele killed Rob because I came home after the fact and I wanted to call the police. And she kept saying, telling the police won't bring him back, but it'll separate us. They're going to take you away from me. I'm going to be back at the mental hospital, all of these things. And so David thought, you know what? Maybe I can learn to live with it. So he continued on with his life, and it was so hard. I mean, he would just have all of these thoughts and these memories, and he just felt guilty and ashamed. But for some reason, Adele, she wasn't going through it with him. It's like it never happened. It's like her best friend died, but it didn't really faze her at all. And I kept trying to leave, but she kept telling, me that she'll go tell the cops that I killed him because that's my watch down there, that I killed him out of jealousy, out of spite. And so I just constantly stayed. But I mean, you made the choice, Louise. You sent that letter to the police, and I'm just gonna go tell them everything. Like, I'm done. I'm done hiding. Like, I don't want to be in this relationship. She's gonna kill me. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna go to Scotland, and I'm gonna tell that police everything. And so he's at the train station, and he's like, I'm gonna go, okay? And she's like, okay, like, love you, bye. I guess they, like, forgive each other. And he hops on a train to go rat himself out to the Scottish police, right? Mm-hmm. Now, meanwhile, Louise got her own plan. She picks up her son from school and immediately drops him off at the husband's house and says that mommy's got some stuff to do this weekend, but I'll pick you up later. She goes back home to her house, and she starts looking around, and she's going, Adele, are you there? And a couple minutes later, Adele calls her and says, did you ask for me? And Adele starts confronting her about forking her husband. And she says, yeah, I was there. I watched you fork my husband. And I thought, I just wanted you to hate David. I just wanted you to be on my side, to be my friend. But no, you would feel guilty, but you would still keep forking the man that I love. And that's when Louise is like, well, guess what, bitch? The man that you love is on his way to Scotland right now because I sent a letter to the investigators telling them that David killed Rob. And Adele starts freaking out because it seems like Adele probably really, really loves David still for some odd, strange reason. And she was like, why would you do that? No, they're going to take him away from me. And she starts screaming, fuck you, on the phone, like a crazy, like a episode. Like she's losing her mind, right? Like it was an insane yelling session. And she hangs up the phone. So then Adele has a flashback to the last day that she saw Robert. So maybe this is going to tell us about the heroin thing, right? Like, did he overdose? And he was in the bath doing heroin, and she brought him a box, like this really beautiful box. And she says, something to keep your heroin in. And he said, oh, well, now I have something to remember you by. And she's like, what do you mean? Why do you have to remember me by it? He says, I think I should leave. No, Rob, why would you leave? No, it's gonna get weird, and I'd rather leave with good memories than make it get weird. I mean, you guys have this beautiful life, this beautiful fairy tale, and I'm just gonna get in the way of it. Eventually, it's just gonna be weird having me here. So I'm gonna remember you by this. And she's like, no, please, just stay. Like, you can stay as long as you want. Do you know how many rooms we have? Like, if you stay on that side of the house, like, I'll never see you. And he's like, no, Adele, it's weird. Do you want to try something before I leave, though? And so she's like, what? Let's try something new. I want to show you something. And they walk into the forest together. So Adele, in real time, she starts writing a note. And it says, it all started with a fire. So it's kind of fitting that it all ends with one. It's kind of like history repeating itself, I guess. I am the one that put Rob's body in the well. David had nothing to do with it. His only crime was protecting me. David deserves to have love, and he's a good man. I held on to him for too long, and I can admit to what I've done, but I can't face the consequences. And she signed a suicide note. And she texts Louise, so Adele texts Louise, and she said, you are right, I have to make things right, and maybe now David can be happy that I'm gone for good. I was your friend, Louise. Please remember that. I was your friend. And Adele texts Louise that, and she starts pouring gasoline on the house. Now, Louise, she has a flashback while she's reading these text messages to her nightmares. So we can kind of assume that someone that she loved had taken their lives. And now she's like, oh my God, this is going to happen again. Like, even if she hates Adele, like, no, you can't, like, take your life. So she rushes on over to Adele's house, and she's banging on the door, knocking on the door. And you know how she had broken in last time? Well, they had replaced the window, and now it's like a dense window, I guess. So she, like, can't break in, and she's freaking out, and she sees smoke accumulating. And she's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So she's sitting there, and she's like, I know what I can do. I can try to help. And so she starts pinching herself, counting her fingers. Meanwhile, Adele is inside the house doing heroin. So it seems like she's trying to take heroin to, like, pass away. And so Louise is outside on the front step, counting her fingers, you know, imagining the door, and she starts astral projecting into the house. Now, meanwhile, Adele, she's leaving her body too. She's astral projecting.
Oh, they can meet each other?
Yeah.
As spirits?
Yeah. Now, Louise is looking inside the house. She's, like, trying to fix things. Meanwhile, Adele's astral projection enters Louise's body.
Oh, you can even do that?
And Louise walks into the house, somehow is able to get in, and goes to Adele's body. Now, Adele's body somehow has Louise's spirit, because I guess when you're, like, a spirit wandering around, like, you need to have a body. You can't just, like, you know, have two spirits in one. And so now we have Louise Adele. So Louise's soul inside of Adele's body, and Adele's soul inside of Louise's body. So I'm going to call it Louise Adele and Adele Louise.
It's so confusing.
Okay, so now at this point, Adele's body can't get up. It's Louise.
Yeah.
And she starts talking, and she says, what's going on? What's going on? And she sees herself entering the room. And she's like, Adele, is that you? Why am I in your bed?
Okay, how did the other girl walk in?
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Hole.
Anyway, so she walks in, and she's like, what's going on? What is happening? Why can't I move? And Adele's spirit inside of Louise's body tells her that's kind of what happens when you do heroin for the first time. I guess, like, maybe your body is used to it, but your spirit's not, so you can't move. And she starts getting her box and getting more heroin. And she starts injecting Adele's body with Louise's spirit. And the last words that Adele's spirit in Louise's body tells her is, "You have no idea the shit that I went through to earn this. It's mine." And kills Louise Adele. And drags Adele's body outside the house now with the suicide note, okay? And the cops, she can hear the cop sirens, and she's holding Adele's body, but it's Louise. And she starts crying, acting as if I just lost my dear friend in a fire. So at this point, Louise goes back home, but it's Adele. So Adele's spirit is inside of Louise now. Louise. The police think that everything is settled, you know? Adele admitted to killing Rob. Rob is dead. They find Rob's body. All of that jazz.
Found Rob's body?
Yeah, in the well. And, you know, Adele is dead. So makes sense. David's free to go. He didn't do anything. She confessed to it. They had a fire. All of that jazz. She overdosed. I mean, it makes sense, right? Now, Adele's spirit inside of Louise's body. She goes home. She's trying to, you know, find some things. It looks like she has no idea where anything is. She also goes into the mirror and says, "I'm Louise Barnsley. I have a son named Adam who's 7 years old, and he's my entire life." And she keeps repeating it in like the tones that Louise uses, not just, you know, saying things. She uses her phone navigation to get to Adam's dad's house. And this is when you get an inkling. It's almost like the movie Us. Like the dad opens the door and he's like, "Oh my God, I heard your friend died in the fire. Like, are you okay?" "I'm good. Where's my son?" And you hear Adam screaming, "Mommy!" And he stops because she's not smiling. She's not trying to hug him. She's just looking at him. He says, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine, son. Let's go." And Adam looks really skeptical about his own mom and walks with his mom, and they go back home. Now, at this point, Louise and David make up, and they start making out, and they want to get married. But it's Adele.
Yes.
So he's like...
David has no idea.
David has no idea. So he's going to remarry his wife. But while that is happening, we have a flashback to when Adele and Rob went out into the forest, right?
Yes.
Well, he taught her that he wants to try something new with Adele, that you can actually swap bodies. And he wants to try for 5 minutes to see if it even works. And so they go out into the forest, they lay down, and they swap bodies. So now Adele is inside of Rob's body, and Rob is inside of Adele's body. And Adele wakes up, but it's Rob, and he says, "Can't believe it fucking worked." And he looks, and Rob is laying there with Adele's soul, and she's saying, "Wait, Rob, what's going on? I don't like this. I feel really weird. Can we not do this anymore? I feel really weird." And Rob's soul inside of Adele's body injects Adele's soul with Rob's body with heroin.
Yeah.
And says, "I'm sorry, but I can't go back to living the way I used to anymore. Not after all the things you've showed me."
Okay.
And he throws her down the well, but it's Rob's body, but he throws Adele's spirit down the well with the watch and calls David and says, "I don't know what to do. Can you please come home?"
So David is clueless.
Clueless.
Oh man, poor man.
Yeah, so now we find out that it's not Adele Louise, it's Rob Louise. And so we also find out that Rob had a sick fascination. It seems like he genuinely did like David. So I don't know if he was bisexual or gay, but he had mentioned to the nurse that he likes dicks anyways, you know? And like when you see him meet David, like I said, it's almost like he's enamored. Like, wow, this guy's really handsome. He's, you know, really nice.
So he does like
He does really love David, and he loves being rich. And a lot of questions, you know, I had that I found out on Reddit was like, why didn't he just swap buddies with David? But it's like, because you have to both be astro projecting. Like, this doesn't just happen. You can't just enter someone's body, you know?
That's why he was so excited when he found out. Louise. What?
So they get married. So David gets married to Rob again in Louise's body. So after their marriage, she's in the wedding dress and they're driving, and David's like, "Where should we go for our honeymoon?" And then she's like, "Anywhere." And you see Adam, her son, in the back just looking miserable. And she says, "Why don't we go on a cruise?" "Mom, you hate boats." And she looks back at her son and says, "Sometimes people change." And that was the end.
What? That's pretty good. Despite the
astral projection.
yeah. Oh man.
It was a lot because I genuinely thought someone was a serial killer. You know, when she kept saying like, he kept saying, are we gonna have to move again?
Oh
I
man,
kept thinking maybe you're going around killing
like,
people.
if I think back from the beginning, I guess everything else will make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I feel like it is a weird, I don't know. I heard the book is good. The show is good, but it's like everything is saved for the 11th hour. So it kind of is like this satisfying, but really not satisfying.
But wouldn't that be more fun to watch it for the second time? To pick up all the little clues?
But it's so slow that I feel like it's not as intricate of a plot. So I feel like you're not sitting there like watching a Marvel movie, like fucking Easter egg. It's kind of like, yeah, there's some shots that look like, oh, maybe you're seeing it less from a camera perspective and more from an astral projections perspective. But other than that, I don't think there's like any crazy like, oh my fucking God, did you see that? That's connected to this and this is connected to that.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
So that is the 6-parter of Behind Her Eyes. Now can you see why I couldn't do a 2-parter? Even though this one is massively long. There was just nothing covered in like the first hour of even this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know in the comments and make sure to check out JuneShine. I'm going to leave a link for you to get 20% off the 18-pack bestsellers because there's, oh my God, it's so good. You need, cheers, mate. And I'll see you tomorrow.